All right, class. Professor Cooper here. We're going to talk about data frames. This should come right after your video on matrices. Data frames are arguably the most likely object you're going to see when you're working in data analysis. Um, there are variants of this that include things like tibbles and data frames, or data tables, sorry, and then tables. A lot of the functionality will be similar, but maybe not the same. Um, when it comes to data frames and matrices, they're also very related. Um, Data frames can accept almost all of at least the subset operations that work on matrices, but matrices don't necessarily accept the subset operations from data frames. So data frames are a little bit more flexible in that sense. And we're going to show you some examples of what that means. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a data frame using the data.frame function. And then we're going to move on from there. Just a quick note about coding. So we're going to do a data frame.function, which is just another function, right? You know that function open close, right? We're starting to use functions that might require functions inside them as well. So multiple sets of parentheses might be needed. So it's a good idea to go ahead and set them up with the right number of parentheses first. That way you're not trying to figure out later on when you get an error why you are not getting R to execute the way you want it to. So let me give you an example. Data.frame, open close parentheses, right? And then you see down below, I say x equals, and then I have a concatenate. Go ahead and put those parentheses in too. And then do a comma, and then do y equals c parentheses. See, every time I'm creating empty functions and then I'm filling them in so that I know that all my parentheses are properly counted. Anyway, that's just a little word of advice. Okay, anyway, making a data frame. So here's what this line says. I'm going to create an object and call it data1. That object is going to be created with the data.frame function. And so data.frame open close. And then you can name the variables inside this function while you're creating them. So this is saying I'm going to name a variable, call it x. It's going to get the sequence 1 to 10 combined into a vector. That's what that c open close function is. And then I'm going to separate by a comma, and I'm going to do the same for my next variable. And it's going to be y, and it's going to be the sequence 21 to 30. And then comma, z is going to be 91 to 100. And you'll notice that they're all the same length. And in fact, in a data frame, they have to be the same length. Now you can have missing values and things like that, but the dimensions of a data frame are always going to be like the dimensions of a matrix. You can't have 5 rows of 4 items and then a 6th row of 2 items, right? That doesn't work. Okay, so now we create this and then we look at it. And you see we create this data set. It's got labels for the variables. It's got this observation counter going down the side, and then the values that we gave it. Now let's say we want a subset and get some stuff out of it. We can actually take the matrix subset operator, which is the hard brackets with the commas, where you have row on the left of the comma and column on the right of the comma, and we can use that. So if I want to get, let's say, the element out of the data set that is from the 6th row and the 3rd column, I can use the hard brackets like I would have with a matrix. Okay, I do that. And you see you go down to 6, you go down over to the 3rd column, the number is 96, and you see it pulled that out and it printed it. All right. Now, data frames also have a $sign subset operator, which is very useful and does not work the same way in matrices that it works in data frames. So this is one of those cases. So if I say data $z, that means go inside the larger object called data1 that now has smaller objects inside it, like z. Z is another object, but it only exists inside the data1 object, right? If I do this, it's going to show me all the values inside z, and it has actually extracted them from z and extracted them from the data1. They're not inside the data frame now, they've been extracted, but we're showing them to you. Okay. Now, here's a quick note on whether or not z is an object all by itself. Right now, z was created in the context of this data frame that was created. Z should not exist at all on its own. Meaning, if I try to say, show me z, it's going to say, what are you talking about? There is no z. There is a z, but z only exists inside the larger object data1. So in R, you have to tell R to go to the larger object first, data1, and then go to the smaller object, the subset, z, inside it. That's going to be confusing every once in a while to you, but that is how the structure works, and once you get used to it, it won't be a problem. Let's see. All right. So here's a good example of the fact that when I call data $z, these have been extracted now. They're not, data $z is no longer really inside data1 anymore. It's been pulled out. Okay? And how do we know that? Well, this shows you that it's not in that same structure. It's now just pulling all the values out in a vector format. So if you want to keep subsetting and pull a particular element out after you use the $sign, if you try to use the comma, that a vector itself doesn't have dimensions as such, it only has length, right? It doesn't have rows and columns in this particular vector anymore. So trying to use the comma would kick back an error saying incorrect number of dimensions, because there aren't dimensions, there's just length. There's really, or you might think of it as one dimension, right? So you see here, if you want to subset from the $sign further, you go data1 $z. You can still use hard brackets, but you can't use the comma. You just say, I want the fourth element in the length of z. And it'll show you that that fourth element is 94. All right. Okay, finally, let's talk about recoding, because what's going to be really important is being able to recode values. All right, I'm back to the original data1 data frame. I'm going to show you how all four of these following pieces of code do the exact same thing, and one of them is a little bit weird, but actually quite interesting and will be useful to you. I've shown you already that you can go to a particular element, like row 7, column 3. So row 7, column 3, 97. We can also use this to recode values. So if you put it on the left side of the assignment operator, you can say, go to the row 7, column 3, and give it the value 4. Now you can see I've reprinted data1 after executing that, and it is now 4. That should be a Z. And I'm going to change this so you can see that this works. Now I'm going to do data1 $Z, and then I'm going to do 7. And you can see inside that vector, we've replaced the value that we just put in with 999. Okay, now we're starting to get somewhere interesting. Now this next line is a little bit different in the sense that we get inside data1 $Z, but then we do something different inside the hard brackets. We give it a rule that is true or false, a logical. Okay. This is important because what we can do is we can say, take data1 $Z, and anywhere where Z is exactly equal to 97, replace it with 4. This is especially useful for when there are multiple values that you're trying to recode over like many observations. So that works the same, and I should change the number so you can see. So I'm going to make it 777 instead. I'm going to run it and then go back and show it to you. Oh, because it's no longer there. So let's say 999. So now it's 999, remember? So the 97 or whatever is no longer there. Let's run it, show it to you, and there you go. It changes to 777. Okay, finally, this one is the one that can be really interesting and useful because you can actually recode one variable according to the values of a completely different variable. And this is, let's say, data1 $Z, anywhere where data1 $X is equal to 7, change it to, I'm going to change it to 888 now. All right. So what it is saying is go into where the length, go into the length of X in data1 where it's equal to 7, which is the 7th row. Go over to Z and change it to 888. All right. So I've shown you a bunch of different ways to recode some variables using data frames. Showed you different ways to subset. This is a good intro to data frames. Next stop is going to be lists. Be safe. Have a good day.